What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 18 of the Rondo. Ryan is my name, and as always, joined by my partner in crime, Josh Parrish. And Josh, before we talk anything football, there is something that I have to tell you that happened on one of our episodes while we were on break. You know, the ones that we pre-recorded, like the Newcastle one. Accidentally left in the part where either me and you went to the toilet. So in the middle of the episode, there's just a break, and one of us gets up. I don't know. It's one fan of the show, Dan, actually told me that we'd left it in. Bit late to get rid of it now. So
you edited it and re-uploaded it, right?
No, I didn't.
You edited it and re-uploaded it, right? This is like the Anakin meme.
Oh my god! But yeah, anyway, super funny. But it's that is why also last week I said it was episode 16, but the Newcastle episode was actually an episode that I forgot to take into. So that Newcastle episode threw us off.
Is that canonical? Are we just forgetting that existed? I'm not
sure.
Yeah,
we're just pretending that we never spoke about Newcastle.
I don't think we got any of our predictions right. So
no, we didn't. So we can just pretend that episode never happened.
No one saw Chris Wood coming. He wasn't on the January transfer shortlist, but there you go.
But hey, smart player, right? Smart play to go to your relegation rivals, take one of their best strikers. I mean, it is a bit of a baller move on Newcastle's part.
It's sort of like the Bayern Munich model if Bayern Munich were trying to escape relegation from the Bundesliga and not just weaken their title rivals every year. It seems to work for them. So yeah, it's a sneaky play. I don't mind it.
Yeah. Well, look, let's start at Liverpool today. We're not going to talk about Manchester United at the top of the show, so everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. Mohamed Salah, who is currently at the AFCON, contracts negotiations still up in the air. And I want to get your take on this, whether the FSG, the ownership at Liverpool, should cough up the cash to pay Mo Salah what he thinks he deserves, which has been a reported £400,000 a week, or whether you think that money could be better invested elsewhere into the squad. What's your take on the Mo Salah contract standoff?
I did think it was interesting that Mo Salah did that big GQ profile the other day with all of the fancy shots of him and the headline, which was
he looked like he was like Glastonbury.
Yeah, I'm sure those interviews are done a long way in advance before they actually run. But I thought it was interesting that it dropped now while he's on African Nations Cup duty, and nobody can come up to him and say, "Hey, what the hell?" So he didn't say too much in the interview. He was sort of like, "Oh, what I'm asking for isn't unreasonable. You know, the club knows, where we all stand. I want to stay, but, I want to be paid what I'm worth," kind of thing. Even not in that clear terms. That was certainly what he was hinting at.
Yeah. Well, to put it into context, right? To put it into context for you, he's 29 at the moment, obviously in the form of his life. Many argue should have been in Ballon d'Or contention. But in terms of just pure numbers, Cristiano Ronaldo is £500,000 a week at Manchester United. He's 36. And Kevin De Bruyne, who only recently signed a new contract at Man City, is bagging £400,000 a week. So it begs the question, does he deserve to be mentioned and paid for in the same breath as some of the best players in the league?
Yes, but you have to take into account Liverpool's context and circumstances. They don't have the financial muscle behind them of the two Manchester clubs. FSG, their owners, typically, if you look at their record in American sports, they don't like to pay star player wages. They prefer to try and find the hidden gems and get them on their kind of second or third contract rather than the big payday that happens when you're in your late 20s, maybe around 30. So they don't usually like to pay that contract. They often let star players walk in this sort of position. But I think Mo Salah is in a different class and is a different caliber player to what they can get, what they could replace him with. And therefore, I do think they have to stump up the cash. Yes, he's 29, and you can maybe look to Aubameyang as an example of where that went wrong. At Arsenal, where they paid Aubameyang, before that they paid Mesut Ozil, and they ended up with players that were underperforming past their prime and very difficult to shift on the wages that they were getting. It kind of depends on the length of the deal, I suppose. But Mo Salah, given that he's peaking right now and is, if not the best player in the world, one of the best players in the world, he should be on the same money as De Bruyne. I do think that. And he seems to take care of himself in a way that suggests he could have longevity in this sort of form. And you look at star players from around Europe, and more often, the really determined characters, the guys who have put in the work, are scoring goals into their mid-30s, even late 30s. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is still scoring goals in Serie A, and he's 40. He's a man. He's 40.
Yeah.
Like Cristiano Ronaldo is still doing it, irrespective of, the defensive shortcomings that we've covered. Robert Lewandowski is 33 and is still one of the best strikers in the world. So I don't see why this couldn't be a suitable investment if, Liverpool add 3 years to his current deal and pay him the money he's asking for.
So if FSG make him the exception to their rule, which is what you've described, that financial strategy in terms of longevity of players, does that risk then causing a bit of friction and imbalance in the squad for other players that think that, look, if Mo Salah can get that kind of money, well, why can't I get paid something equivalent or within those realms and those reaches? You're looking at players like Alisson, arguably one of the best goalkeepers in the world, Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Does that cause a bit of friction?
Possibly, but you have to manage that because Salah is different. This Liverpool team hasn't really been about individuals, but Salah is now hitting a level where he's scoring absolutely magic goals out of nothing. He's not just the leader of the press and the premier counter-attacking player in the league anymore. He's also, when he's tightly marked in tight spaces, being able to create things. Like he's hitting a different level to these players. He's different to Trent. He's different to Sadio Mane, who I don't think has been at his peak, at his best this season, really. So I think if the squad harmony is to continue at Liverpool, they have to recognise that Mo is in a different class at the moment, and he deserves it. Whether Liverpool can afford to pay him the money, whether they actually have the money to sign him on that contract is another matter. And that's very interesting because the American owners have typically been a little bit more focused on profit and tight-wadded than some of the other foreign owners that have come into the Premier League. So if you look at other examples of American ownership, famously the Glazers taking dividends out of Manchester United, which is a money factory. It's licensed to print money with all the sponsorship deals they attract, but they take dividends out of the club every year. They've been making profits. You look elsewhere at American ownership in the Premier League. Arsenal, Stan Kroenke has not pumped money into that club. So I do think that there's a pattern of American owners cheaping out on their star players and perhaps the team suffering and not winning the trophies that they should as a result.
So let's end the Mo Salah segment with me playing a bit of devil's advocate here. He doesn't sign the new contract. And when his contract winds down end of next season, he'll have his pick of clubs, I'm assuming. Where do you think he ends up? Because obviously these financial demands don't change, just because he's a free agent. He'll be wanting to get paid what he thinks he's worth. In my mind, Barcelona and Real Madrid, with their financial troubles in La Liga and stuff like that, probably not going to be able to afford him. Or Barcelona might just sign him and never register him until they get Samuel Umtiti off their books or something. Where is a realistic destination for Mo Salah, if not Liverpool?
It's a good question. And I think that's why FSG is playing this game of brinksmanship with him, because they think the market for Mo Salah is softer than Mo Salah might think it is. Madrid are in a different financial situation to Barcelona. Let's not lump them together so readily. I mean, Barcelona are the most indebted club in the world. And
apologies to Real Madrid.
Madrid apparently have the money to sign Kylian Mbappe this summer. So
we'll see.
There's a different situation. Even if they're both not at their, they're not at the financial might that they once were. But you look elsewhere, other Premier League teams, I think it would be a bit of a slap in the face to Liverpool fans. I don't think Mo Salah would want to do that. I mean, imagine if you went to Manchester City.
Yeah.
You can imagine fans just burning their Salah jerseys. It would be messy. Yeah. It would be very, very, very messy if he decided to do that. And I think he's well aware. PSG is always the obvious one that is bandied about. Do players want to play in France. Well, if the numbers are right, signs point to yes. And then Bayern Munich. So there aren't too many options out there. There aren't too many clubs who pay that sort of money. And I think that's why we're seeing negotiations stall, because FSG is kind of waiting for Salah to realize that maybe Liverpool is the best situation for him, and maybe he'll be willing to take a pay cut when he comes to that conclusion.
Look, whatever happens, you'd think that making a move to a Premier League rival will make it unforgivable to a lot of Liverpool fans, not just to Mo Salah, but also to the ownership. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I read an article that that was published a few days ago that suggested that he's actually signed a new contract, and they're just waiting to announce it at the right time. So we'll see how that plays out. But another player that finds himself in a bit of a contract predicament, man like Paul Pogba, who many of you know I love and adore. Just one of my favorite players to watch. His contract is fast running down, but obviously he's had his injury woes and hasn't been playing that much. Where do you think his future lies? And also with the famously infamous Mino Raiola leading the contract charge for him.
Yeah, Mino Raiola is more trouble than he's worth. And sometimes his clients are too, unfortunately. Paul Pogba, according to some stories in the English tabloid press, which we know are not always reliable, but there is a story out there that Paul Pogba has been offered Ronaldo money, been offered £500,000 a week, which, I mean, I wonder if Mo Salah read that story and thought, like, what the, what do I have to do? I don't see what Pogba has done in his Manchester United career to deserve that kind of money or to deserve that sort of offer, other than, you know, look great in an Adidas commercial. Like,
brings vibes.
He does bring vibes, but does he bring success? And he's one of these players, he's a Goldilocks sort of player that everything has to be perfect for. You know, it reminds me of the situation of Tanguy Ndombele at Tottenham at the moment. You know, you've got to have the right midfield balance around him and give him less defensive responsibility and let him play on the left of a midfield. Like, there's been so many theories bandied about why Paul Pogba can't replicate what he does for France for United, or what he did at Juventus for United.
And before you go on, right? Like, we've talked about this. What is the perfect system or situation that he has to exist in to be able to replicate that success? And for people that aren't really familiar with what we've spoken about before, what is the perfect situation for Paul Pogba to operate in midfield?
Well, there's sort of 2 points in his career where you thought that he was a world-class player, and that was during the time at Juventus, when he was playing in a 3-5-2, and he was basically the 10, the player who was given license to go the furthest forward. And he had Arturo Vidal alongside him, who did a lot of the pressing and a lot of the defensive work, and Andrea Pirlo behind him, who kind of dictated the tempo. So that just left him the freedom to dribble and the freedom to get into the box and do things in the final third, essentially. So he didn't have the burden of creativity from deep, or the burden of the defensive duties. And he also had BBC behind him, Bonucci, Barzagli, Chiellini. So, you know, that back line with Buffon as well, there wasn't too many teams who were getting past that back line. So sometimes his defensive shortcomings weren't exposed in the same way.
Yeah.
Then you look at France in the 2018 World Cup, and I think that team was pretty ordinary and got a long way off playing pretty pragmatically and counterattacking.
Yep.
But he had N'Golo Kante in midfield with him. So that's just, I mean, N'Golo Kante was so good, he got Danny Drinkwater England caps. Like, you know, so I mean, yes, he didn't have a great game in the final, and Zonzi had to come on and sort of stabilize France in that game. But but throughout the tournament, you know, Pogba was able to operate at his own pace, so to speak, with Kante alongside him. So, look, I don't know if a player who has to have everything perfect to deliver the right performances is worth investing that sort of money in. And the saga of Pogba at United and the agent shenanigans and so forth. And is he going to leave? Is he going to stay? I'm a bit tired of it. And I think everyone could use a fresh start, which is why I think Pogba hasn't actually signed that new deal, because United hasn't been good for him either.
Yeah. And do you think that this deal is put on the table to secure their commercial asset, right? Like to make sure that he doesn't leave on a free, that they can tap him out for what he's worth brand-wise? Or do you think there have been conversations behind the scenes with the new management, the coaching staff, and they believe that they can actually get the best out of Paul Pogba?
I think commercial considerations rule the roost at Manchester United. And Ralph Rangnick is not currently the director of football, even if certain newspapers might like to portray him as such. He is not. He's the coach. And the role he moves into after this season is an advisory one. He doesn't get to make the final call, which is the fundamental shortcoming of this whole arrangement. So they've still got, even though Ed Woodward's gone, they've still got bankers making the decisions, essentially. So I think first and foremost, it's a commercial consideration. But secondly, it's the embarrassment of having spent £80 million, having broken a British transfer record on a player, and then letting him leave on a free transfer. That would be embarrassing for Manchester United. But I think they need to swallow their pride and let him walk, because getting his wages off the books will open up an opportunity for a new number 6, which is what this team really, really needs. Manchester United should have been throwing money at Marcelo Brozovic.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I know he's 29, but he's currently, for me, the best or one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. And instead, he's agreed a bargain basement value extension at Inter, which, I think is a huge missed opportunity. If they lost Pogba on a free, they could have got Brozovic to replace him on a free. But, United obviously are run on a basis of, on one of my other podcasts, The National Curriculum, we like to talk about the term NRI, which is something that my friend Ante Jukic came up with, which is the name recognition index. So basically just fame and notoriety ruling your decisions. And United are the clearest example of a club run on NRI.
Yeah. And in similar vein to the Mo Salah conversation, where does his future lie then? If he doesn't sign, who are willing to stump up the cash and take a risk, right? I mean, when you talk about Paul Pogba, how much football have we really seen from him in the last year, 2 years, to then justify a big contract for him to come to your football club? In my mind, there've been talks of PSG, which might make sense to go there. You talk about a club run on NRI, which is something that I'm going to use now. PSG are the biggest club that use that. And then, he would fit in that team, if not for footballing ability, just for sheer star power. But, does anyone else seem like a good fit?
I think PSG is the place. I mean, Pogba in Paris, that would be fun, right?
That's the ad campaign.
There's clearly a gap there opening up in the wage structure with Mbappe leaving. Obviously, they don't play the same position, obviously. But you could potentially go to maybe a diamond in midfield and accommodate Pogba in there. It depends on the coaching situation as well, because Pochettino doesn't seem to be enjoying himself hugely.
Yeah.
It all depends on how the Champions League goes. Maybe Manchester United will still be after Pochettino. Who knows who comes in that case? But Pogba to PSG, it makes sense to me. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it happens all the time. So,
well, if Jordan Brand and Nike are looking for someone to write, the campaign, Josh Parrish is free, and I'll tag along, to be honest, just for vibes. But Pogba to PSG, I reckon we get that trending.
Makes sense to me.
And moving on to, we're talking a lot about a lot of standoffs, and these are just sad topics, to be honest. These are really nitty-gritty topics. But we're going to end the show today with a dismissal from Everton, Rafa Benitez. The Rafa project has not played out the way that the ownership thought it might. And if anything, it left on a pretty sour note, with chance of Rafa get out of our club when they lost to Norwich City on the weekend. Where did it go wrong? Which is a very big question, but I think if anyone can succinctly draw that down, it's you. Because look, he managed 22 games over his time on the blue side of Merseyside and only won 7. So not a very good return on investment there. What went wrong for Rafa?
You're acting like this is a failure. I'm saying Operation Agent Rafa mission is successful. You know, he comes in, he nearly gets Everton relegated. He sells Lucadinho to Stevie G, and then he F's off. You know, Operation Agent Rafa, complete. No, I think actually that suspicion of Rafael Benitez from Everton fans, you know, he said in his own statement that not only did they have to try and win games, they also had to win hearts and minds. And Rafael Benitez's football doesn't often do that. So, you know, they were suspicious of him as a former Liverpool legend who won the Champions League there, and, you know, going to the rival club. Is he really here for our best interests? And Everton is a very emotional club. You know, it's a club that can turn on a manager very, very quickly. It can get quite poisonous there. So, you know, if you're playing pragmatic football and you're losing, there's not much there for people to latch onto. You know, if you're losing games, but they can see signs that you're trying to construct something that will benefit the club long term, then maybe you can keep fans on side if you're playing attractive stuff. But pragmatism has to come with results. Otherwise, it's just crap. So, you know, I think this was pretty predictable from the way Everton's been run in the past few years. They've got Mashiri in charge, who has a lot of money, but he clearly does not know how to spend it. You know, their transfers have been a disgrace. They've changed managers all the time. You know, Martinez, Marco Silva, Koeman, going through all these coaches, Carlo Ancelotti, like, you know, they've made a lot of bad decisions there, and they've sacked the director of football, put Rafa Benitez in charge, and then sacked him a couple of months later. So, you know, it's just shambolic. And if the fans want to direct their anger somewhere, it should be at the ownership. It should be at Mashiri for just plunging this club into disarray. And I think the only way to win the fans back is to bring big Duncan Ferguson in as the interim manager and lean into the emotion of the whole thing. Even if that's not the right decision for the club to try and avoid relegation, that's what the fans will latch onto. Everton legend. He knows the club. Like, this is the backwards way that Everton operates.
And I mean, it's interesting that you brought that up because, you know, as a Manchester United fan, when they brought Ollie in, it was that reversion to the emotion of the old days of like someone that knew the club. And obviously now we know, you know, a few seasons down the road, that's not a sustainable model. But another name that's been thrown up is whether Wayne Rooney might come and take charge and leave his Derby County rescue project behind and take over at Everton. Apart from, you know, legendary names that feel and fuel the emotion of that football club, who are some realistic targets that could come in and make it work?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I look at the odds for the replacement managers, and I just shake my head at all of them. Like Wayne Rooney, sample size too small. We don't know that he's a good coach. He's only being mentioned because he's a former Everton player. And that was the same logic that brought Frank Lampard from Derby County to Chelsea. So I've even seen Frank Lampard mentioned in the conversation for this job. I don't know why. Like, he was atrocious at Chelsea. So, you know, he just continually blamed the players for everything that went wrong, which is not a great like media strategy. Every question, you know, why did you underperform today? That's one for the players. Like, you know, just take some responsibility. Roberto Martinez is actually the bookies' favorite to come back from coaching Belgium.
Yeah, saw that. Yeah,
take Everton. I don't know if he's the man for a relegation scrap. His teams tended to be quite attractive to watch, but also concede every goal off set pieces and never be able to remedy that. It was the classic case with Wigan where they won the FA Cup and they got relegated in the same season.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's a good manager if you maybe want to get your team from mid-table mediocrity into the Europa League. But I don't know if your team is 16th in January, is he the man to bring in? I'm not sure. So I really don't have a good answer to this, unfortunately. They might have to resort to one of the classic firefighting English specialists.
Sammy Allardyce.
Well, they've already had him. So, I even forgot about him when I was listing former Everton managers. So it's weird. What the fans want and what the club wants seem to be different. And it's just a messy situation. I think give it big Dunk Ferguson till the end of the season.
And you never know, he might pull it off too.
He might, and at least they will go down with the fans on board.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you need. That's all you need, a little bit of nostalgia. Well, Josh, that brings us to the end of episode 18. I want to leave you with my highlight from the week just gone, actually. I've been following the AFCON very closely, been watching the highlights. Impossible to find where to watch it if it's not beIN Sport. After you told me about your beIN Sports experience, not signing up. So I'll just be watching highlights on YouTube. My kit of the tournament has to be the Malawi kit. If anyone knows what a cop one, I'd be willing to pay money to get a Malawi kit. That shit is fire.
You might also get player issue. I don't even know if they make replicas of those countries. So look,
Malawi players, on the off chance you watch this, I'm an L or an XL, so hook your boy up. But my highlight in terms of a game was the someone versus Sierra Leone. Was it Ivory Coast versus Sierra Leone? Where that last second equalizer, when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, that looks a bit dodge. But then when I saw the goalkeeper hit the ground and hit that divot and all that dirt just exploded off the ground, I was just like, wow, the AFCON is just, what a tournament. Just thrills and spills all over the place.
Sierra Leone are having fun. They are having a good time. They are happy to be there, and they're mixing it with the big teams. The one thing about Sierra Leone that I think might get confusing if you're playing on that side is there's 6 blokes named Kamara in the squad, which I suppose is the Sierra Leonean equivalent of Smith. And I actually saw that Chris Kamara, the most famous Kamara, of course, red card, but for who, actually had the opportunity to play for Sierra Leone back in the day, and he regrets not taking it because he never ended up getting that England call up. So he's been following along and supporting them and tweeting out messages of support throughout the tournament, which is fantastic. So
it's been an amazing tournament. If you haven't been following, you 100% should start. It's just football in its purest form sometimes, and like you said, Sierra Leone and a few of these smaller minnow countries, if you'd like, getting their chance to kind of mix it on the big stage, and have all these eyes on you at such a festival celebration of the game. Is incredible. It's incredible to watch. So that's been my highlight.
I think that group is the one to watch as well. This episode will go out on Wednesday, I assume. So Friday morning at 3 a.m. I know it's the devil's hour. It's a bad time slot, but if you're going to watch one of these games, Ivory Coast versus Algeria. Algeria had a longer unbeaten streak, I think I'm right in saying, than Italy in international football. And suddenly they're bottom of the group. They're bottom of the group and they're fighting for survival in this tournament. So they need to beat Ivory Coast on Friday morning to get through. So that's jeopardy for you. And that's what, these group stages of major tournaments are all about. And I'm really looking forward to that game in particular. It's going to be a long night because there's the Women's Asian Cup that morning as well, which Australia is participating in. So I'm probably not going to get any sleep on Thursday night, Friday morning, but looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, look, let's see how Algeria goes. Obviously defending champs as well. I'm not wrong. I think they won the last AFCON.
Yes, they did.
So big upset there. We'll end on this. What are you looking forward to with the Women's Asian Cup? Something that fans should keep their eye out for.
Well, I think the big storyline heading into this tournament, aside from, the new Matilda's boss trying to find the right formula, trying to find balance in the squad. They've taken like 9 strikers and only like 5.
I saw that on the list. What? 4 midfielders, I thought.
Well, look, it's curious the way this team is being managed at the moment, and heading into a home Women's World Cup next year, they really have to start to get it right. They've got a big problem with depth at centre back, which they're trying to sort out. But there's still like transformational talents in this team. Obviously Sam Kerr, but also Mary Fowler. He's an amazing player. She's an amazing player to watch. She can sort of turn on a dime and deliver a crossfield pass to within an inch of its target. It's a pleasure to watch her play. I am looking forward to the revenge game coming up in the group stage. So the manager of the Philippines women's team is an Australian coach who used to coach the Matildas and was sacked on the eve of the 2019 World Cup in very controversial fashion. And he's going to be playing against the Matildas in the group stage. So I think he's going to have extra motivation to try and get a result. And usually these group stage games, the depth in Asian women's football isn't that great. There's only a few really good teams, Japan being one of them, notably. They've a Women's World Cup winner, of course. But that game is different. That game is going to have a lot of storylines swirling around it. And it's so important that the Matildas win, because if Alan Stajic manages to beat the Matildas with the Philippines, it's just massive egg on the face of the Australian Federation for sacking him. So, that's got some stakes riding on it, that game.
Well, look, I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about once the tournament kicks off. But in the meantime, fingers crossed that the Matildas get it done against the Philippines then.
They have to win that game. Otherwise, just chaos will emerge, and it's going to plunge the tenure of this current coach into considerable jeopardy with only 18 months to go before the big one on home soil.